go live then. Excellent. Well, I think we might be live on YouTube. We'll just give it a second to catch up. Yeah, there we go indeed. We are indeed live on YouTube. And I can hear myself twice, which is always fun. Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Tailscale Ask an Expert session with me, Alex. Nice to see you. We'll give folks a few minutes to sort of come in here at the top of the hour, but I'd like to introduce today Andrew, who's going to be my co-host. Welcome.
Hello. I'm Andrew. I'm the tech lead for the security team here at Tailscale.
So yeah, if you have any security-related questions, any compliance-related stuff, Andrew is your guy, and Lord knows he does an excellent job for us here at Tailscale as well. What kind of stuff is involved in sort of day-to-day of being a security person at a company like Tailscale, Andrew?
There's a lot of things, really. It's like multiple jobs in a trench coat. We do everything from application security and infrastructure security, so like making sure the actual product is safe, to corporate security, to compliance, to incident response, and so on. So the days are sometimes unpredictable. If someone reports us some serious vulnerability or we discovered internally, that sort of throws out all the plans, and we have to deal with that as quickly as possible. But so far, we've been pretty good about patching everything that we discover or is reported to us within a very short amount of time.
Yeah, making sure that all the secrets stay in the correct basket, huh? That's the important stuff. My
And
volume is apparently much lower, so I'm going to just try and fix that for a second. But I mean, I don't know what hello? Maybe I should shout and talk a bit louder. How about that? But I see the green bar on Zoom, so please in the chat let me know. Also, a little bit of housekeeping today. Typically, how we do this stuff is we monitor chats in a few places. We have the Q&A in Zoom, so if you're joining us via Zoom, welcome. Please use the Q&A box specifically in Zoom to ask us a question there. If you're on YouTube, of course, we'll monitor the live chat on YouTube. Also, in our Discord channel, there's an events channel in Discord, which we will be keeping an eye on throughout today's session. Post your questions in there and we'll do our best to get to them all throughout the session. Typically, we run out of time before we run out of questions, but who knows? Let's see. So, yeah, hopefully the audio is good. Fingers crossed the audio is good and we can move forward. But we do have a question already in the YouTube live chat about ESP32s. I don't know, Andrew, if you know much about those.
Yep. Yeah, so the question is, can we run Tailscale on ESP32s? And today the answer is no. There is an engineering team working on minimizing the size of the Tailscale client, which practically means that you can, at compile time, choose to disable or like discard a bunch of features that the client typically supports, like Tailscale SSH and subnet routers, etc. Like you can selectively kick those out of the build, which reduces your binary size at the end of the day. But so far, the smallest binary we can build is still too large to run on ESP32. There is a different work stream in flight that's not quite finished yet that might make this possible. So keep an eye out in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
On our blog.
I was just talking with some of the engineering team last week about that work stream that Andrew was referencing. And whilst we're not ready to share any full details yet, the ESP devices, they're sort of really tiny little boards, maybe even a third the size of a credit card or something. Like they are really tiny. And they're really useful for embedded situations. Like I've got one up there in this room running the air conditioner in this room, for example. I hooked it into the Mitsubishi mini split and put an ESP home firmware on it, and it's a little embedded device. The downside of an embedded device is that it can't run a full operating system, a full stack, something like that. So it just doesn't really have the memory space available to run. I mean, it can run the Tailscale binary, apparently just fine, according to the engineering team. But what it can't do is run the sort of 10 or 20 megabytes worth of memory required for things like node mapping exchange. So like how that ESP would know where the other nodes on the tailnet are to do key exchange, all that kind of stuff. So it's really close. And I think I think there's a really strong desire for us at Tailscale to support really cool devices like that because ESPs get put all over the place. You wouldn't believe some of the places that you find them. But the other aspect is that many other people just don't know quite what the use case for an ESP in Tailscale would be. So please, if you have a really good one, put it in the chat because I'll feed that back to the product team and maybe we can get that work prioritized a little bit. Um, what's your do you use ESPs for anything, Andrew, in your house?
No, I'm a paranoid security person, so I have as little tech as I can in my house. The most I use is just a Raspberry Pi with Home Assistant to have some like manage some
Oh yeah.
local Zigbee devices and then Matter devices. But that's all like trying to keep it in house and not use any cloud service for that if I can. But I don't have an ESP32 right now.
Yeah. So apparently there's an issue on the Zoom side, which I'm just working through on the back end. But I love me some Home Assistant, by the way. Like this whole house, all these colorful lights, everything in this house is Home Assistant. Chef's kiss. And Tailscale runs just fine as part of a Home Assistant add-on.
Yeah, I know you're a big fan of all the home automation and
Yeah.
home living.
Yeah, I am. It's for me like the whole idea of juggling 12 different apps on my phone, one to control the lights, one to control the thermostat. It's just no, 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 no. I just want everything in one place. Um, okay,
Yep.
so yeah,
And that's kind of
uh,
related to the whole vision of the new internet that our CEO has expressed some time ago, where
yeah.
like really the future, well, one of the possible futures is that instead of having these giant centralized cloud companies that you kind of give all of your trust in and hook up all of your devices to, you have small groups of people who run little bits of infrastructure. So you'll have like a techie person in your family who's going to run a tiny little home lab and have like run like a bunch of self-hosted services for the rest of the family, for example, for the friend group.
And somehow
So
that person
Tailscale,
always seems to be me in my family.
yeah, relatable.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that really is where Tailscale shines. And yes, you kind of the obvious caveat is that Tailscale is also a centralized thing that you put your trust into. But for some, in many situations, even when we have an outage, it's not going to take down all your automation, all your connectivity. Um, and if you're really, really worried and you don't want to trust us, there's ways to work around that, such as Tailnet Lock or just running head scale yourself and not even using our infrastructure. But that's too far in the weeds, and I see we have a few more questions.
We do. We absolutely do. So, Capel Capel Davis, I hope I said that right, asks, is there an issue using an Apple TV as a router? I'm going to assume in this case they mean a subnet router. So what is a subnet router, first of all, Andrew?
Oh, a subnet router is I can think of it as a gateway into your internal network. So it's a Tailscale node that you put inside of your home network or your data center network, wherever. You give it a CIDR range, so a set of IP addresses that it's gonna be able to connect to locally, and then every other node in the tailnet can talk to those IPs through this router. So if you have a bunch of local devices and that cannot like have Tailscale running on them directly, or you don't want to install it everywhere, you can just pull up a subnet router, such as on your Apple TV and home, and you can access all your home infrastructure while on the go without having to expose it to the public internet.
And that's the magic of it, right? I mean, whilst we would recommend that you install Tailscale on every device that you can, good luck installing Tailscale on an ESP, for example, or a printer, or many other closed firmware, embedded devices, that kind of thing. Like we run on Apple TVs, we run on Android, we run on like all sorts of stuff, but there's still plenty of places that we don't run. And so in that situation, if you want to access a device from a Tailscale device into a network and a device that isn't running Tailscale, that's where you would use a subnet router. And the Apple TV actually got support for this a couple of years ago now. So you can advertise a specific subnet to your tailnet so that when your devices connect in, they get that route for that specific IP range published to them as part of the node map that gets sent out. And therefore, every time your device goes and tries to reach an IP address in that block, Tailscale will kind of intercept that traffic and send it over the encrypted WireGuard tunnel and land on the remote side. So it will land on the Apple TV in this case. It's acting as a subnet router. And then those packets will look like they actually originated from the Apple TV inside your remote network, unless you turn off something called SNAT, but that's a bit more advanced, so we won't get into that. And so, yeah, there's no issue running a subnet router on an Apple TV. In fact, it's one of probably the best remote subnet router exit node devices that exists. It doesn't use much power. It's relatively affordable. I mean, $100 isn't cheap, but it's not, like buying an entire computer, especially in the middle of the RAM apocalypse, So the other thing is that you can probably ask a parent or somebody to put one in their house and then say, like, you get a free Apple TV out of this deal. And you can just use it as a remote exit node and a remote subnet router if you need to. Love me
Fun
some Apple
fact,
TV stuff.
fun fact, an exit node and a subnet router within Tailscale is literally the same thing. It's the same code path, it's the same feature. The only difference is that an exit node is basically a subnet router that advertises 000/0, like the entire IP space. But
Same
the way
code,
it's
huh?
implemented, exactly the same code. It's literally doing the same thing. So, and lots of people are using Apple TV as an exit node at home. So there's no reason it shouldn't work as a subnet router for your local
Yeah.
network either.
I'm curious. Like Capel Davis replied to our little chat here in the chat saying, "My Apple TV subnet router has stopped working. Can you give us a little bit more to go on, and we might come back to you a little bit later on in the episode." Don't forget, by the way, you can submit your questions to the YouTube live chat. We're also looking in the event discussion channel in our Discord, discord.gg/tailscale. Um, I know there's a question here. I know this is off topic, but how can I become a 10x engineer like you, Alex? Well, first of all, I'm not an engineer. I tried to become an engineer and failed. Well, kind of. Fresh out of college, I was a Python developer for a couple of years, and then I ended up spending all of my time automating the infrastructure for the development team that I was working on instead of working on the stuff I should have been working on. And in that moment, I kind of realized I was an infrastructure guy and I just like piecing the bits of the jigsaw together rather than writing the code all the time. So, do what you love is probably the answer to that question. Find the bit of the tech stack that interests you the most and get after it. That's what I did, and that's how I ended up here. How about you, Andrew? How'd you end up in security?
Oh, I started as a software engineer originally many years ago, and I was originally working in Java, writing some Android apps and other kind of janky software. But then when I moved to the States, I switched into more of like a DevOps role, and Go just came on the scene, so I started writing everything in Go, and that was probably the best career choice in my life.
Yeah.
And then as I progressed in the sort of DevOps infrastructure, software engineering backend engineering role, I eventually specialized in security when I was at Google working on Kubernetes, because that seemed like a really interesting space to me. There's a lot of interesting problems, and you can still be a software engineer and not just like a, you know, operational person doing security reviews and giving access to people. So that's when I focused on that, and that's been my career path ever since. Yeah, again, same as Alex says, find something that really interests you, where you get a lot of satisfaction out of solving problems in that space, and it's going to be very rewarding in the long term.
That's just it. Do what you love and you never work another day in your life or something goes the saying, right? Any chance you could help implement pfSense and Tailscale a little bit better together? Well, there is a plugin by a chap, I forget his name. It might be Sheridan Computers or something like that. He worked on a third-party plugin for pfSense and Tailscale. That said, running Tailscale actually on the firewall, it's a pattern that I used to do a long time ago. I used to use OpenSense rather than pfSense, but they kind of cut from the same cloth. Very, very long drama-filled story that I won't get into about how those two projects came to be. But so I used to use OpenSense back in the day and put Tailscale on the OpenSense box, and it works fine. But if the well, I suppose I'm going to talk myself out of it in this entire thread, but I was going to say if the internet goes down, then so does your Tailscale situation. But then if the internet's down, you're not accessing it remotely anyway, so maybe it doesn't matter. Um, I'm going to answer your question with a question. What do you want to see done better in pfSense? Do you want a UI element? Because a lot of the plugins that exist, the third-party ones, you kind of have to click your way to victory. Whereas with Tailscale, like as a command line interface, it's a couple of commands and you're done, and you just never touch it. So, like, genuine question. Like, I don't know what's you want a UI. I assume that's what you want. If so, a plugin does exist already, not an official one, but it does exist.
Yeah,
All right.
very
But
much depends. Very much depends on the problems. It could be something that we can solve in Tailscale. It could be something that pfSense has to solve on their plugin side or whoever manages the plugin. The other thing it was mentioned is if the user interface is the main obstacle, Tailscale does have a web interface in the client. I think if you search for Tailscale web client, it's gonna find the right documentation page. But basically, every Tailscale node hosts a little web server where you can access it remotely. You can access it over your telnet from a different node that you own, and you can enable and disable features and do a lot of the other stuff that you could do on the CLI as well. So that might solve a lot of the things that the native UIs and plugins don't solve.
you know what finally killed pfSense and OpenSense for me was embracing my Unify overlords. And then I ended up not putting Tailscale directly on the Unify devices because it's not officially supported. You can do it on some of the devices because they're just running Debian underneath. Um, but then in updates, sometimes it gets wiped and it's just not an officially supported path. So I figured, given that I do this for a living, I should probably stick to a supported path. And so I've just put into my mother-in-law's house in England one of these little, in fact, I happen to have one on the desk right here, one of these little Dell 1 litre PCs, just these tiny little guys. I picked this up before the Rampocalypse began for about $150-ish, something like that. Um, and I put this in, it sips power. It's like 5 watts or so. And it's running a subnet router. It's running an exit node. It's running Home Assistant in my mother-in-law's house. It's doing a bunch of stuff. And it just sits there quietly sipping power and it's separate from the firewall. Um, so yeah, I mean, official work hat on, separate firewall, keep firewall as appliance, and then put your Tailscale stuff onto something like a Raspberry Pi or a little Dell box or a Apple TV or whatever. Okay. Question here about ACLs. Is there a way to automatically connect a dynamically created device with a pre-auth token? Okay, this question makes no sense. Grammatically, this is not English.
I
um,
think I,
what's the gist of the question, Andrew?
if I understand it correctly, there the admin of the tailnet wants to allow um, users to register a node via QR codes and have that node be like able to connect to another similar node. And if similar also means owned by the same user, then the answer is yes. In the ACL syntax, in the destination rules, like in the destination field of the rule, you can
Oh,
set
yeah, that makes
something called
sense. Yeah.
auto group column self, and that's basically going to map to all of the other nodes that match, like that have the same owner. So if you're, you know, Andrew at tailscale.com and I have multiple nodes, if I have a rule that grants me access to auto group self column star, so any port, I can connect to any of my other nodes on any port, but none of the other nodes of other users in the same tailnet. That might be what the user wants here. The question means here the pre-auth token is throwing me off a little bit because you cannot register as an admin. You cannot register a node on behalf of another user. You can only register your own nodes or nodes that are owned by a tag. So tag is kind of like an alternative to being owned by a user. In
Yeah,
that case, that's
this
just a difference.
this question's a little bit confusingly worded, isn't it? But there's a follow-up here saying, can I use ACL to control access? For now, I can use ports, but no Tailscale domain.
Um, I don't know what tailscale domain means here. You use ACLs to control access within your tailnet. So you specify both a port and a destination entity, and it can be an IP address, like a telnet IP address. It could be a user, it could be a tag, it could be a group, an auto group. There's a lot of different options. I encourage you to read our ACL docs. They are relatively, like, they're pretty well written and not too verbose, so you can actually figure out what are all the options. But yes, you absolutely use ACL for access control within the tailnet.
Now, I need to talk to you a little bit about Winter Update, which is coming next week. This is going to be there's going to be a huge number of new features and announcements coming next week. So please get registered for the upcoming webinar, which producer Natasha is going to put in the live chat for me, I'm sure, in just a second. This is going to be on February the 19th with Adrian Dewhurst from our engineering team and Jay Stapleton from our solutions engineering team. So if you want to get subscribed to find out more about all the great, exciting stuff Tailscale's been working on over the last quarter, and there is a doozy of an announcement coming next week, I promise you, it's worth the price of entry. The other thing that I should plug whilst I'm in housekeeping mode is Tailscale Up is coming back. Our user conference is coming back in San Francisco in August next year, August the 26th in 2026. That's this year. Somehow it's 2026 already. And it's February. It's middle of February. You'd think I'd have figured that out by now. If you buy a ticket today, we've got early bird pricing going right now. So you got $200 off. If you were to pick up your ticket by the end of March, you get $200 off at tailscale.com/tailscaleup. Okay, now don't forget to ask your questions in the box down below on YouTube, or again on Discord. We're over on the events discussion channel. Lovely stuff. Discord.gg/tailscale to find that, by the way. Okay. Belko asks, are we far away from looking at a Tailscale client app signing link for Android, like Tailnet Lock? I really hope to see it soon, as it's keeping me away from turning on Tailnet Lock.
As far as I know, nobody is working on that right now. It's a known gap in Tailnet Lock. I believe you can use an iOS device or any desktop platform to do the Tailnet Lock, to be at the Tailnet Lock signing node, but not Android right now. I honestly don't know what the timeline of that is. I know it's something we want to do eventually, but it's, as many things, a question of resources and
Yeah.
priority, and how many people we have and how many other projects are in flight.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like, we just got to find the end time for it. If there is a customer who wants to sign on the dotted line, so to speak, and pay us some money, and that is blocking them from a deal, you can be sure that it will get some engineering hours. But it's just one of those things. We've got a lot of those things that are happening right now. Tailscale's user base has grown 3-4x. Paying customer base has grown three or four times in just the last year. So there's a lot to do. But Tailnet Lock's a really interesting feature, and one I think we should actually just talk about for a second, particularly, Andrew, given your security slant on the world. Tailnet Lock is essentially one of those features designed to help with the paranoia of trusting Tailscale. What does it do, Andrew?
In short, it prevents us, Tailscale, from adding nodes into your Tailnet without your knowledge. The way it works under the hood is that you designate a couple of nodes that you control, your own machines, as signing nodes in Tailnet Lock. And anytime another node wants to join your Tailnet, those nodes have to sign it. And every other node in your Tailnet will verify that everyone else who's in the Tailnet has a signature from a signing node that you control. So we cannot in any way forge those signatures. We don't have control of the private keys. We see all the nodes joining, and we could potentially block a node from joining. So even if you sign it, we can just not tell all the other nodes about its existence. But we can't just like pop one into existence and have it be trusted and available from your other nodes. So there are a number of customers who legitimately don't want to trust us, not because we're malicious, but because we can have an incident. We can have an employee who's gone rogue and tries to do something malicious. All these things that any company has to deal with. The Telnet Lock allows you to mitigate a lot of the risk of that with our own access to your Telnet.
Yeah, Tailnet Lock is one of those features that you don't really think you need it until you get on the wrong side of an auditor or the wrong side of an incident where you think, oh, I wish I had had that turned on. So it's just a really useful feature. We don't actually see huge adoption for it as a feature, but I think as a checkbox in the list of features that Tailscale needs to have, it's really important and really good that it exists. So
Yeah,
rest
and
assured,
I
we
should.
are looking at it as a
Yeah,
feature.
and as a honest warning, it does come with the operational overhead. Like you do have to have signing nodes that you designate. You have to make sure they stay connected. If you lose all of the signing nodes, you basically have to rebuild the tailnet from scratch. And if and you have to do something to actually sign the new nodes that you're adding. So if you have like a relatively small tailnet and you occasionally add nodes, that's not a big deal. If you have a big tailnet, a big organization where nodes get registered and removed all the time, it's very dynamic, then you have to build tooling to deal with this with these signatures. So it is not a freebie. It's not just something that everyone should enable just because they can. But if you are worried about the types of issues that can come from us being compromised, Tailscale, this is worth looking at.
It is separate because there are two modes here that you can enable. Tailscale lock is like the most secure, the most paranoid option. But there's another one where you can just select have an administrator approve a node when there's a request to join. We use Tailscale internally. Like, funnily enough, Tailscale uses Tailscale to build Tailscale. Go figure, right? And every time I join a new device to the corporate tailnet, it has to be approved by an admin.
Yep,
Yeah.
and it is sort of like a manual approval. So you just see the node, see all of its attributes, so us who's registering it, and you approve it. But yeah, that's what we do internally. Again, this is the approvals can be done by a number of roles in the tailnet. So it's not just admins; it can also be IT admins or owners. So you can kind of like distribute that responsibility if you have a big organization. But it is a much easier way to control admission of nodes into your tenant.
I have a question here from Richard Hollis. How long until we can share a Tailscale service with external users? Now, I saw this question coming, and I know I know the answer is not yet. So I reached out to one of the product management team whilst we were talking just now. And it's one of those features that it's actually on the back end quite technically difficult to orchestrate. And so the exact wording from the product team on this one is it's on the roadmap, but currently not planned yet. So Richard, it's on the roadmap and we'll get to it as soon as we can. All right. Can you break down having a subnet router for local DNS versus basing magic DNS entries that match your local DNS instead? What's the sort of difference there?
The there's two bits. Yeah, there's two bits of difference. First one is obviously with local DNS. You have to manage your local DNS. Have to have it built in your router or something like that. It can get messed up in fun ways, but that is like Magic DNS is kind of available out of the box in Tailscale when you use it. Um, the other thing is that Magic DNS, you can use the kind of bare short names of nodes, so just a single word, your host name, or you can use the fully qualified name, which ends in TSNet. That is something that will be a lot less spoofing proof. So if I just plop a malicious device on your local network and connect to your Wi-Fi, I cannot just give it whatever host name. Like I can give it whatever host name I want, and the local DNS will probably just allow that to be resolved and be routed. But with Magic DNS, if you use fully qualified names, I cannot impersonate another device this way.
I think it's important to talk about the distinction between the purpose of those two use cases. So Magic DNS is really designed for you to refer to the nodes on your tailnet by human readable names rather than remembering IP addresses, that kind of thing. We also do support being able to override the DNS upstream and send a custom DNS server to every node on your tailnet as part of the node map. Now, I just released a video I think it was last week, about how to do that with Pi-hole. So you could actually make one of the nodes on your tailnet a Pi-hole or an AdGuard Home or a Technetium, or you could even use a hosted service like NextDNS or Control D or whatever. and force all of the nodes on your tailnet to use that DNS server that you request. Because of the nature of Tailscale connecting everything together seamlessly and doing the NAT punching, you could just run that pi hole in your house and then use that pi hole from wherever you are, for example, from your phone at the coffee shop, whatever. And so it really, in that scenario, I like to put the node, the pi hole node directly onto the tailnet and give it a magic DNS name and a Tailscale IP. But there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't use a subnet router and advertise the local LAN IP instead to all of your Tailscale clients. It would work just the same. I suspect the performance would be slightly, and I do mean slightly worse, because it's got an extra hop, maybe an extra millisecond or two. It has the extra hop of going through the subnet router, an extra layer of masquerading to kind of resolve. But for the most part, I mean, it's up to you. Pick your poison. You pays your money. You takes your choice. Like it's one of those that there's so many different ways to configure DNS. There's a reason that Jeff Geerling has a T-shirt that says it's always DNS. Is because there's so many ways to screw it up. So it's up to you which route you choose. All right. Will you ever do a deep dive on ACLs, like things like tagging and auto groups? Already done one. I mean, I can do another one if you like, I suppose. But I did one a couple of years ago. Since then, I should say, we've released the new grants feature. So it's not just ACLs anymore. Grants are like ACLs version 2, if you want to think of them like that. They're a lot more powerful. In fact, Andrew, maybe we talk a little bit about some of the application capability grants and that kind of stuff that grants enables.
Yeah, that's something we use quite heavily for a lot of different purposes internally, and it's kind of available in a lot of TSNet apps externally. So if you're not familiar, TSNet is a library that you can um, compile into your like a Go program, and you will register a Tailscale node on your tailnet in process without doing all of the like wiring into like the local networking and DNS and etc. But the node will be reachable over your tailnet and can also get identity of the users or devices that connect to it. That ties into ACL grants, where in addition to saying like this source, this user can connect to this device on this port, you can also add another field that's called the application capability grants. But basically, it's a freeform JSON object that you put associated with that grant. And then when a connection comes in from a user matching that rule, you will also get all the grant information. And so in that grant, you can encode stuff like permissions for what the user is allowed to access. We have this open source project called Satek, which is our kind of credential manager. You can think of it as sort of a HashiCorp Vault alternative. And we use ACL grants for permission management in there. So you have a bunch of credentials at different paths. So you'll have like slash prod slash I don't know front end slash API token. And so in ACL grant, we can say like, okay, the user can read the value or list the secrets on that path, and then the like an admin can write to that path to update those secrets. And so whenever the static server receives a request to fetch a secret, it'll check those grants and say, like, okay, this user's logged or not. And you can build, and we have a lot of similar examples of that pattern of doing permission management through ACL grants. But it's like a pretty flexible tool that you can wire up in all kinds of creative ways. Again, it's a free-form JSON that you associate with an incoming request, and you can tell whatever you want about the user in there.
One of my favorite ways to use the grants feature to limit the access floating around my tailnet, for example, is to say to certain nodes, you're allowed to see this subnet that subnet router's advertising, be it not allowed to see this one. So you can even get so granular that you can have one subnet router advertising 10 subnets, and then you could split up that 10 to like 10 other nodes on your tailnet and say like each one is only allowed to see one of those siders. It's really cool how granular you can get with that stuff if you want to. And that's the beauty of it. Like if you want to just have a permissive allow all rule on your home lab tailnet, great. Nobody's going to complain. But if you want to take it to work and sort of put it in an enterprise situation where everything needs to be very strictly locked down, you can do that too. Now, I'm going to remind you once again that Tailscale Up is coming in August next year, this year. I keep saying next year. Oh, it's coming this year, August 26th, 2026 in San Francisco. You can get registered at tailscale.com/tailscaleup. We've got early bird pricing right now. If you pick up your ticket before the end of March, you get, is it $200 or $300 off? I forget, but there's a good discount anyway. So yeah, love to see you at Tailscale Up. I'm going to be there. I think Natasha's going to be there, our community manager. Of course, we're going to have a great lineup of great speakers, loads of Tailscale related swag events. It's going to be a good time. Come see us. We would love to see you. Okay, next question. Right. What about UDP traffic? What about UDP traffic? Oh, for
Sure.
grants and things like that. Yeah. I
That
mean, yeah.
also works. So the grants are operating on sort of a peer-to-peer basis. So it depends on who your peer is and what your local device is. That defines what grants you will see, and they are like actually associated with the underlying WireGuard tunnel. So all of your TCP or UDP traffic between the machines is carried inside of the WireGuard tunnel. So can still fetch the same grant information about the remote end of the UDP packet, technically not a connection, as you would with a TCP connection. It's just like here's a IP on the tailnet. What grants does it have? Type of API.
Is there a way to route a specific domain in my subnet to go out through an exit node? Like if I wanted to appear in a certain location anytime I use that domain, but not everything else. Yes, good news. Have you heard of the good word of app connectors? It's a great
Exactly.
feature.
App connectors is yet another special variant of a subnet router, same as exit nodes are. Um, it is a domain targeted subnet router essentially, rather than like being a CIDR range targeted. So you set it up in your, believe the setup involves updating ACLs to say that when you're running this, you're targeting this domain or this like suffix of a domain, so like star.google.com. It will go through the subnet, so through the app connector. The setup of that is a little bit finicky sometimes because you have to have access to the app connector. You have to accept subnet routes on the client side if you're using like Linux. And obviously you have to update ACLs. All the instructions for setup are described in our docs, and it's a one-time thing. But once you do that, it will just keep routing requests to that domain through that node.
Now, whilst we wouldn't, you know, we have our work hat on here, we wouldn't necessarily condone circumventing geo restrictions with certain pieces of content. I'm from England, perhaps you'd noticed, and I live in America these days. And there is a certain television service that I kind of miss from my home country. So I use app connectors from one of my parents' houses, and it works wonderfully well if you put the right domains in. I'm not going to say any specific names. I'm not going to tell you anything else, but there's a video linked in the YouTube chat down below about how to configure app connectors. Essentially, the magic phrase you're looking for is split DNS. And this is a very common thing to do in normal like configuration of networks between a local situation and a remote situation. The advantage here is by tagging a specific node as an app connector, you can say, well, all this traffic must exit through a residential IP address in this country. And you can be very, very specific about which nodes that traffic exits via. And again, the remote side has no idea that it's originating from your laptop here in America. It thinks the traffic originates from the subnet router or the app connector, sorry, on the remote side. It's magic. Give it a go. It might be one of my favorite Tailscale features that I honestly I use it every day and I don't even notice anymore because it just works and it's awesome. Now, my firewall is blocking subnet routing. I can ping remote Tailscale networks, but TCP fails. It might be the SPI firewall. Do you know anything about how I can get through this?
If you can ping the remote, I assume remote tailscale networks means the IP address behind the subnet router. If you can ping that, and it's actually the the device that you're expected to be, not your local IP that happens to overlap. If you can go through the subnet router and reach things behind it, but you can't reach the subnet router itself, it's likely an ACL issue. So you should be able to do tailscale ping. So generally speaking, if you have reachability problems, there's a CLI command tailscale space ping, and it has a bunch of flags. So there's a lot of different ways to ping a Tailscale or an AP via Tailscale. The basic one that when you use a normal ping command is ICMP. So that's just your network stack doing it and reaching the end device. There's also something we call TSMP, which is you pinging the Tailscale node over DERP. So you can know if like the two devices can talk at all, even if are not allowed to like reach a specific port or ping over ICMP.
Well,
And
on
I think
that
there's
topic,
other.
actually, we had a follow-up from one of the earlier questions here, saying, regarding my previous point, I'd love to see the ability to share a single service the same way we currently share individual nodes. So I don't think they're talking about Tailscale services here. I think they're literally talking about using something like Tailscale Serve to advertise just a single port on a TLS-based back domain and certificate. He says here, I'm forced to share the entire node and then manually restrict access via ACLs to just that specific port. Is a native service sharing feature on the roadmap to simplify this? I wonder if we can do that today with grants, maybe.
So I interpret the question as maybe relating to sharing across tailnets as a node sharing. In which case, I don't think services support that today. I don't see a reason why it wouldn't be possible in general, but it's not something that works today, as far as I know.
Well, here's the
Um,
thing. So you are sharing the entire node with the remote person. That is true. Like, um, but you still need to run a web server in order for them, or a Tailscale serve command, in order for them to be able to effectively reverse proxy whatever the services on the remote side you're trying to share with them. Let's take any self-host like image, for example, for photo backup. Like when I want to share that with my mum in England from here, I will share the node on my tailnet with her, and then I will do Tailscale serve BG port 2283, I think it is. And so Tailscale serve is only exposing behind that TLS name that single individual port. Yes, technically you could connect to all the others via the IP address of the node too. But as you rightly say, restricting that access via grants right now or ACLs is is the approved way to do that. And if you want to get more granular, this is one of the reasons why I actually recommend in a lot of my YouTube videos using the Tailscale sidecar Docker container method, so that each container service gets its own node on the tailnet, and then the blast radius of what you're able to connect to from inside that node is literally limited to inside that container's namespace. So it's one of those things where you don't necessarily have um, a strong, maybe you don't have a strong opinion one way or the other about Tailscale sidecars versus this, that, and the other, but uh, that's a really strong use case when you want to limit that traffic really granularly. Um, yeah, just works really well. Okay, well, we appear to have lost Andrew's video for a second, so I'm going to keep talking, figure out what's
I'm
going
still
on.
here. My
Oh,
USB-C cable is just janky that I connect the camera through.
oh, right, I see. Good. Well, I'm glad you're still with us. That's good. Okay. Bundesen 100 asks, my NAS occasionally switches to a relay connection even on the same local network with no CG NAT. Other devices like my Google TV stay direct, and a reboot fixes the NAS. Any ideas why this might happen?
Let me reread the question.
Well, there is a feature that Tailscale has just released called peer relays, which is a way for you to advertise a specific node to act as a like trusted endpoint for all of your Tailscale like relays. But if it's falling back to DERP, there's usually a good reason for it. So there are several different types of network address translation. And I know here you say there's no CG NAT, but there might be a hard NAT situation. So I'm going to link you to a tool by one of our solutions engineering team called Lee Briggs. And the tool is called Stunner. And this is used to detect your NAT type really quickly. And what I'm wondering is if maybe for some reason your network just has a tricky NAT situation. I mean, it's usually the NAT punching is usually very reliable. So it's kind of unusual to hear this situation. Maybe there's a DNS problem. I've seen issues sometimes where resolve.conf gets overwritten by two competing services, like Tailscale's coming in from one side and then maybe Docker's coming in from the other side, and they're trying to compete with each other, and maybe that can cause issues. But Self-hosted peer relay YouTube video when, Alejandro, next week. Get subscribed. You're gonna love it. It's gonna be great. Yeah, take a look at Stunner. It's a really useful tool. I don't know, Andrew, if you have any other ideas on this one though.
No, I mean, if it's the same local network and one device like the Google TV can connect direct all the time and the other one can't, it's likely some kind of issue in the device that's not against getting relayed. It could be something about the local networking config on the device. It could be the version of the client. Maybe it's just older and has a bug, or the other way around, a newer and has a regression that we don't know about. But it's always tricky to debug these relaying issues because
Yeah.
the behavior of net punching and establishing direct connection is kind of a probabilistic algorithm. So
I'd recommend you send one of the Tailscale debug packets to our support teams. You can type Tailscale debug. I forget the rest of the command off the top of my head. But that essentially allows you to submit a tar file of it. It's sanitized. There's nothing personally identifying in there to our support teams, and maybe they can help you diagnose why some of these issues are happening as well. Every Tailscale user gets free support. There's just, I mean, if you pay money and you're a business, you get obviously a higher tier, but even as a personal user, you can still open a ticket with us, and we'll do our best to help you. Now, Hello World Anyway writes, is there a way to improve exit node speed when overseas and the exit node is in the US? Well, I'm going
we
to
can
talk
never
about
beat the speed of light.
peer
So
relays again, aren't we? But yeah, the speed of light's a problem too.
yes. If you want to bounce your traffic through US for geo restriction reasons, privacy reasons, anything else, that's you're just gonna have to incur that latency of going the geographic distance. There is yes, peer relays or any other situations where you have a device that you're trying to connect that's closer to you, that's local, and you could have a direct connection.
There was
That's
an example from one of our solutions engineers, Raj, over the holiday period, where Raj went to India to visit his family, and he was trying to connect back to his home lab in the United States from India, and there's no direct undersea cable, so he was bouncing through, I think, Singapore and then coming back to the States that way, and so the performance was just horrid. It was just not good. And so Raj set up a peer relay for his network, and his throughput increased something like 12 or 15x by doing that. And peer relays are really easy to set up. You have just they behave just like any other node on your tailnet. You port forward a single UDP port, and the peer relay listener sits on that UDP port, just quietly listens. It doesn't advertise itself at all. So if someone comes knocking and is port scanning you, until you as the remote side cryptographically prove you are who you say you are, the Tailscale client is completely transparent and basically doesn't leave any footprint on the public internet. So typically I'm not a person that would advocate for punching holes in your firewall with port forwarding. On this one specific occasion, I think you can get away with it because of the cryptographic verification. So peer relays are awesome. And as I say, there's a full video coming, an announcement coming about those next week. So if you want to find out more, please get subscribed and, well, enjoy, I guess. Okay. Hey, both. I would like to visit specific websites via a Mulvad exit node in a different country. Is this possible via Tailscale? I've looked in the apps section, but I've not got it to work yet.
Yeah, app connectors is the answer here. Unfortunately, cannot do that with Mulvad. You would have to host your own VPS VM somewhere to which is you can do as cheap as like $5 a month, so it's not really that much more expensive than Mulvad. But yes, that app connector with your own self-hosted VM would be the way to do that.
Very good. Now, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure that everybody that's joined since the last time I did a little plug fest, here's all the plugs I've got to say. So next week is Tailscale's winter update. A bunch of new product features and announcements are going to drop next week. So make sure you're looking at the blog, look on Reddit, look on YouTube. We're going to be everywhere next week. I promise. You'll be a little bit fed up with Tailscale by the end of the week, in a good way. At least I hope so. You can get registered for our webinar, and there'll be a link to that in the chat shortly. This is going to be on the 19th of February with Jay Stapleton, who's one of our solutions engineers, and Adrian Dewhurst from our engineering team, answering your questions about all the features that we're going to be releasing next week. Also, Tailscale Up is coming back in August this year. See, third time's the charm. I got it right this time. Tailscale Up is back in August of this year in San Francisco. Come join us. Come hang out in San Francisco. There's early bird pricing right now. So if you pick up your ticket before the end of March, you get $200 or $300 off. I forget how much it is, I'm afraid. But you get early bird ticket discount pricing anyway. Natasha, our community manager, is also looking to potentially host some online watch parties around the world. So if you are in a place full of other Tailscale enthusiasts and would like to potentially host one of our Tailscale watch parties, please get in touch with us on Discord. You can talk to us in the event discussion channel, for example. Just ping me or Natasha in there. Okay, all right. Time for a few quick fire questions before we get out of here. Okay. What's your favorite uses for TSIDP if you have one?
Well, the favorite one is basically what it was built for, is using it as a SSO provider for a bunch of SaaS apps. That way you eliminate like a click or two when you're logging into an app where you would have to click through your SSO provider. TSIDP just kind of redirects you and makes it faster. I don't know if I want to call out any specific apps that it works particularly well with, but anything that has support for OIDC SSO providers should be good.
My favorite one is that I haven't logged into my Grafana dashboards in like a year. It just works. The OIDC integration just works. As long as I'm connected to the correct tailnet, it's great. It just works. Okay. Ash asks, any update on ETA for the Tailscale Services Docker video feature? I'm eagerly waiting. Yes, me too. I'm going to lump that into the same bucket as the previous Tailscale service related question of it's on the roadmap, and the features that I need to make that video work as I want everybody else to be able to consume it. Just the feature's not quite there yet. So that video will come, I promise, as soon as services are ready to do what we need them to do to make that video work smoothly. So don't worry, I will keep my promise. We just need to finish the dev on it. Okay. Now, I saw your video on Pi-hole and Tailscale. How can I do that with AdGuard Home? I currently have OpenSense. I have an OpenSense router machine with Tailscale and AdGuard Home plugins installed. Essentially, if you have Tailscale installed on the firewall, you would put that IP address into your Tailscale admin console as the DNS server and then click override DNS. And that's all you got to do. I mean, really, you might need to do something to allow AdGuard Home to listen on all interfaces. That really depends on. I haven't actually done it with AdGuard Home yet. I need to do it with Pi-hole, but those are the kind of things you need to look for. Okay. Is it possible to circumvent the collision produced by another VPN client I'm connected to? I'm not an expert in networking. I only see my Tailscale network is blocked whilst I'm connected to other VPNs.
The short answer is usually no. The longer answer is depending on the OS, it may or may not work. There's not much you can do typically about it. So for example, on like macOS, the VPN apps register themselves as a VPN provider in the system settings, and I believe there can only be one at a time. On Windows, there's probably also conflict in how they wire themselves up to the system. On Linux, I believe the flexibility of AP tables rules allows us to intercept only CGNAT IPs without interfering with the other stuff if you're not using an exit node. So there's a lot of nuance per platform, but generally speaking, it's none of the VPN clients out there play nicely with other VPN clients trying to do the same thing system level.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. Okay, so it's one of those things where if you end up having multiple apps writing to the routing table, somebody's got to win, and one thing is going to override another, and then you end up with clashing. It just becomes a mess. So if you can try and avoid multiple, it's probably a situation. I would also take a look at maybe something like Tailscale's 4 via 6 might be a good solution for you to look to investigate. That lets you, not for commercial VPNs anyway, but for like local subnets that overlap, 4 via 6 lets you route Tailscale traffic between those, even though there's an overlap in the CIDR. Okay, now, do you have a question you want to pick from this list in the last couple of minutes, Andrew?
Let's see. Tailscale services funnel, we already sort of answered. Collision, telnet, device that doesn't run Tailscale but inside a subnet. So bouncing traffic through a device that's running Tailscale to it back into the Tailnet is technically possible with AP tables rules if you are really a networking wizard and have a Linux box, but it's pretty tricky. Let's see what else is like a particularly unusual question.
Can you have more than one subnet router per subnet?
Yes, you can. They will just naturally balance. You want to search for HA subnet routers.
You might run into a situation there where the routing tables between those two subnet routers end up fighting each other. I've certainly run into this situation on occasion. And so if that's the case, you might need to adjust the priority of one of the routing tables so that that will manifest itself by the local IP address of a node stopping responding. So like the 192.168 IP address will stop working, but the Tailscale interface is still working. So if that happens, go look on my GitHub. There's an Ansible role there which I run against all my nodes that just fixes the prioritization of the different routing tables. And that sorts that one out. Okay, is external user support for tail drop planned? Right now, you can only use the feature between devices that you own.
External user, no. So there's tail drop. The answer is no. There's another feature called tail drive. It's not been like super well marketed or advertised, but it exists. Tail drive is more like a shared folder on your tailnet that you can share with any users on your tailnet. If you share out the machine that hosts a tail drive folder to another tailnet, I think it should work and you should be able to share it out to external users as well. But in any case, in either tail drop or tail drive, both parties must be running Tailscale. You cannot just publicly share.
The nice thing about tail drive is it's just a WebDAV server. So like same as what like Nextcloud or whatever like that uses. And so it's just another service on your tailnet. It's just a port IP combo, and you can connect to it that way. Tail drop is really designed as like an alternative to the Apple AirDrop situation. So like if you want to send a file quickly from your phone to another Tailscale node, maybe a non-Apple node, for example, that's really where Taildrop starts to shine. But no, as far as we know, no support planned outside of the individual tailnet. All right, well, I think that's probably all we've got time for today. Don't forget to get signed up for our winter update webinar. There'll be a link to that in the description down below, of course. And also pick up your ticket for Tailscale Up as well, with early bird pricing until the end of March. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Alex, and you've been?
Andrew. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.